Okay, let's do a chronological reading of Marvel Comics. Now, the very first comic book to ever come out, New Fun #1, which I've covered in another video, was released on January 11th, 1935. And that was from National Publications, which would later become DC Comics. Our Marvel Comics story begins the next year in 1936. Martin Goodman was the publisher of pulp magazines under the banner Red Circle, and he published the first of 3 issues of Kazar in October of 1936. These were text stories with painted covers. April 18th of 1938 saw the release of Action Comics #1 from DC Comics with the debut of Superman. And in the summer of that year, Martin Goodman launched the pulp magazine titled Marvel Science Stories, so that now we get our first time using the title Marvel. And the following year, on March 30th, 1939, DC Comics put out Detective Comics #27 with the debut of Batman. And then 5 months later, under the banner of Timely Comics, Martin Goodman published Marvel Comics #1 on August 31st, 1939. And that's what we're going to read here. Now, The Wizard of Oz had debuted on theater screens just 6 days before. The New York World's Fair was currently going on, and World War II would break out the very next day when Germany invaded Poland. Let's take a look inside. Okay, so here we go. The price is 10 cents, which is the equivalent of $2.29 today when adjusted for inflation. Now that's for a 64-page comic book, when today's comics are a third of the size at double the price. So to get the stories in these books, Martin Goodman got them from a company called Funnies Inc. And at Funnies Inc., there were a couple of guys, Bill Everett and Carl Burgos, who were friends, and they decided to come up with characters that could work off of each other. And the theme they developed was fire and water. Everett's water-based character had made its debut a little earlier in the year in black and white in a free comic called Motion Picture Funnies Weekly. This was Namor the Submariner, and his story would need to be colored and expanded by 4 pages for inclusion in Marvel Comics #1. Now, Burgos' fire-based character would be used as the subject for the comic book cover, as illustrated by pulp magazine artist Frank R. Paul. Inside, Carl would write and draw the actual comic book adventure of the Human Torch. Now, this is not Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, member of the Fantastic Four. He wouldn't make his debut for another 22 years. And there's another character in here, Kazar from the pulp magazines. They took his initial story from that first pulp magazine and illustrated a comic version spread over the first 5 issues of Marvel Comics. But again, it's not the Kazar that is currently in Marvel Comics. This is the original Kazar. His name is David Rand. And he's not much more than a Tarzan ripoff. And he has not been seen since 1942. The modern Kazar is Kevin Plunder, and he lives in the prehistoric Savage Land. He made his debut in 1965, and he continues to appear in comics today. Now let's open up this issue. So the inside cover has a gag comic, and we kick right off with the Human Torch. So Professor Horton has created a synthetic man, but something went wrong, and every time his body touches oxygen, he bursts into flames. So he's keeping him in this airtight glass tube. And he demonstrates here by letting a little air in, and he bursts into flames. Now, if you remember in that first Chris Evans Captain America movie, they go to the Stark Expo, which is the Marvel Comics equivalent of the New York World's Fair that was going on in 1939 when this comic came out. And there is a glass tube that Professor Horton, I don't remember if Horton is actually in the movie, but you see the glass tube with the human version of the Human Torch. And now he's wearing red in the movie because that is what this costume will quickly shift to in the comic. He started off blue, but he's better known as being in red, and that's how they have him in the film. It's pretty cool. Here he's just showing him like in a little office to his pals. I like it better having it at the New York World's Fair, or should I say the Stark Expo. Also pretty cool that, Chris Evans played the Human Torch in a Fantastic Four film. 8 bells! You're on time, boys. Well, I've never heard that saying, 8 bells. So there it is. He kind of moves the tube around. He's demonstrating what he can do. You could imagine him taking him to the Stark Expo. So they come up with the idea to entomb him in a concrete block. Boy, they put him in a steel container, dropped him into a big vat of concrete. Poor guy. Enough time went by that they completely forgot about him. I wonder when he actually created him. So there it was. There was a very slow leak that allowed some oxygen to seep in over time, and boom, it explodes in flames, and he is loose on the city. This is really quite the idea. They created a guy that's completely on fire, like a monster raging through the city. What a bizarre idea for a superhero. Well, check it out. He dove into a pool to put himself out, and he's just there underwater. Now, of course, he doesn't drown because he's a synthetic man. Well, it looks like a couple of mobsters are going to try and take advantage of the torch and use him for their nefarious deeds. Okay, so they put him in a glass tube filled with water, carry him to where they want to burn a place down, throw a rock at the glass, he burns the place down, and they're going to cash in on the insurance money. Why couldn't they just set the place on fire? I guess maybe so they could blame it on the torch? Why do they call him the Human Torch? He's not a human, he's synthetic. Oh, check it out. He realizes his flames make him lighter than air and he can fly. He tried leaping and now he's in flight. I wonder if Superman had already started flying by now. This is a year into Superman's comics where he was leaping. Pretty sure he gained the ability to fly from the radio show. Either that or the Max Fleischer cartoons, but both of those came in the early 40s. Maybe he wasn't flying yet. Okay, he's coming after the gangster, mobster, racketeer guy. Oh, he's burning through everything while the guy's trying to escape. That'd be scary. Look at that. He jumps on the vehicle and melts it and burns this guy alive. That rat burned all right. Yeah, he burned him alive. Okay, so he's locked himself into like his own little private vault with a steel door, and the torch just melts through. This is the scene from the cover. Right there, I guess. And recreated right here. Hello, rat. So he picks up a tank of something called Liquidar, which they're referring to as a nitro tank. The torch grabs it, it pours all over him, letting out a gas that make his flames die down. Yet his skin is still hot enough to melt a bullet shot right between his eyes. Okay, so they're kind of figuring out that this nitro allows him to turn his flames on and off. Now he grabs a tank of sulfuric acid, which the torch makes explode and kills the guy. The guy's got a lot of tanks of various liquid in his little lab here. What the heck is he going to do with all this stuff? That's it. He can control his flames with the nitro. Oh, and he can throw fireballs. Now see here how he's a redhead so far. He's more well known as a blonde. Blonde in the red suit. I guess those colors will come in a later issue. So instead of going to court, he just kind of talks to the chief of police, and the chief of police, I guess, acts like the judge and jury and just hands him over to Professor Horton, says, you take him, no charges. I mean, I get it, there shouldn't be any charges, but it's interesting. Interesting way of conducting the law. And back home, they start honing his powers. So he lights his cigarette from across the room. Cigar. And Horton gets the idea that we can make a fortune. So the synthetic man, of course, has better morals than the humans and says, nope, not going to do that. Now I'll be free. No one's ever going to use me again. And he takes off. So that's it. We have our fully fledged, awesome first Marvel character in a comic book. In a Marvel comic book. And we will return next time to see how this comic book unfolds.